Welcome to Nuggets Abode. I'm George Hove, and I am your host. If you're joining us for the very first time, I want you to look at our video, which we recorded, Shouldn't I Always Purchase a Property in My Name? Now, this is a build up to that particular video. So, we talked about the different structures that you can utilize when purchasing a property. What you will find is, depending on your goals, you'd have to choose the appropriate structure. And one of the things that we need to look at is the taxes, the fees that could potentially kick in at any given point in our ownership. It's very much possible that you might buy an asset today, like a property, and then decide to sell it on. Or you may decide that it's an investment that you want to keep. Now, if it's an investment that you want to keep, there are structures or vehicles that may be suitable. However, it also all depends with your wealth flow. What is the minimum value of wealth you're looking at acquiring? It may be beyond thresholds that you might benefit from, which would make the passing on of your estate an expensive process, resulting in a significant depletion of your wealth. So you need to identify the right structures. Another thing that you'll find is if you choose any particular structure and later on decide to change, often it's an expensive process. It's not just a matter of saying, I want to change my asset from my name to my company. It just doesn't work like that. There is a transfer process. There are attorneys which you are going to use for conveyancing, and those are costs. If you already have a bond that is registered, you would need to cancel the bond and get it re-registered. Those are costs. All these costs can be avoided by choosing the appropriate vehicle, by choosing the right structure from the get-go. So use this as knowledge to choose the right structure. Now, one of the things that you'll find is if you decide to go for the trust route, in practice, in most cases, you are looking at setting up two trusts. The first trust is your wealth building trust. And then the other trust is your personal estate trust, where you are placing your own valuables that will be private. And then the other vehicle, you are using it to build wealth, right? So for the personal estate trust or the family trust, you're probably going to put things like your primary residence, things that are paid up, right? You could put your paid up vehicles or any other assets that you may want to own in that trust. This becomes a vehicle for storage of your own trust, independent of you as an individual. And then you have the wealth building trust. The wealth building trust, in practice, the way it's structured is you set up a company, and then the company's shares are owned by the trust. So the trust becomes the shareholder. Now, indirectly, you still be controlling the asset. You may not necessarily be owning the asset directly. It will be owned by the trust. But because you are the trustee or the founding trustee, you will likely also be the director of that company, and you'll be able to control the company. Why would you want to set up that structure? Well, when you set up a trust, one of the things that you're going to find is you're going to need an independent trustee. And that means that most of the decisions that you're going to make, be it to invest, they will need the independent trustee to sign off. This can be a problem because you want to act quickly or you want to make certain decisions quickly, and you don't necessarily want to be bogged down by paperwork. So when you set up a company outside the trust, what you're simply doing is you're able now to quickly and effectively make decisions without being affected by the tedious processes that you find within a trust. So you can make decisions independent of the other trustee. And in most cases, this trustee is a third party. It's an independent person. It could be a trust attorney that you have on board, but it has to be independent. So in your investment vehicle, which is the company, again, what you find is in most cases, in most jurisdictions, the company is taxed at a lower rate than a trust. If I contextualize to here in South Africa, a company is taxed at about 27% and a trust is taxed about 45%. So clearly you can see that in the wealth building trust, if you were to put assets there and they were income generating, your income would likely be taxed at 45%. Of course, you could still employ vesting, but in principle, there'll be times where you'd want to retain the gain. And in those instances, you're going to be taxed at 45%, whereas in a company, you're likely to be taxed at 27%. So you are benefiting from lower taxes, and yet the trust will still be the owner of that company. So already you avoid triggering things like capital gains tax for assets that you are going to continue to hold. You avoid triggering estate duty for assets that are already held within the trust, and that will be your vehicle that you use for investment. So utilize this knowledge to assess what you want to build, what wealth you want to accumulate, and based on that, choose the appropriate vehicle. If your wealth flow is below the thresholds that you will find in terms of abatement for estate duty, like if I look at here in South Africa, you're looking at about 3.5 million. That is an abatement that is available per individual. So if it's below that, it can be viable for you to own in your name because you may not likely trigger those high costs. However, there are still some costs which you will incur. For example, if you go on to pass on, even if you are married in community of property, the first time your surviving spouse will be able to inherit without probably triggering costs like estate duty or capital gains tax. However, they will likely need or to pay executor fees. If you reference our other video which talks about the different taxes and fees that you may likely to pay when you own properties, we'll explain further in that. But coming back to this one, what you'll find is when you go on to pass on and you leave your spouse, they are going to need to pay the executor fees, or out of your estate, they're going to have to pay executor fees. And now, once that's done, when eventually your spouse or your surviving spouse passes on, they will not necessarily just be able to transfer those assets into the children's name. That will trigger a transfer process, and there are costs to transfer. So you're still going to trigger costs related to transfer, costs now related to execution. And in this instance, what you also find is the execution now is now for the full gross estate. And it's possible over time, it may have grown to be above the thresholds. So you need to factor all these costs wisely and choose the appropriate vehicle. If you choose the vehicles now, you're resting assured that when the time comes, it's so straightforward for your wealth to be passed on to the next generation. Do you have any questions or ideas? I want to invite you to put it in the comments below. We are here to help. We'll pick it up and gladly respond. We will gladly appreciate you walking with us this journey. So please subscribe and like and follow us via the handle @Abode.